Alright, hello class. My name is Jeff Ebbing, as you guys probably found out. I'm taking over the course for Dr. Brady during his medical absence. And this week we're in week 6 now, I'm sorry. And we're reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And this is definitely one of my favorite books of all time. I really hope you guys enjoy it and look forward to reading it. And I think one of the reasons why I enjoyed it so much is when I read it, it was completely different than anything I had ever known about the story. Pop culture doesn't portray it the way that it really is. So I think a lot of you may be shocked once you go to read this story and see what it's really about. So this week, just going to go over some brief housekeeping things on what you need to be doing for this course, how to stay on top of things, and I'll just give you a short lecture and give you some historical context for this story. So let's look at the blackboard here real quick. So if you go to our course content page and click on the Frankenstein folder, the week of 9/25, it'll take you here. And here's a picture of a castle in Germany, in Darmstadt. It's actually called Castle Frankenstein. It is a birthplace of an alchemist, Conrad Dippel. And you'll see that a lot of this, this theme of alchemy does appear in the story, and Mary does get some, I think, probably some of her ideas from the story based off of this place. It was also known that Conrad did some experiments on human bodies in this castle. So it is interesting. If you do want to do some more research on this, I think that'd be kind of fun to learn about and share with the class. You can post that in the discussion board if you'd like. But your homework for this week will be to obviously read the story, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, watch my lecture, and post in the discussion board. You're going to upload the first part of your journal. I know that was due a couple weeks ago, but I made some changes. So to upload your journal, you just click on this title right here, and then you'll browse your computer, find that Word document, and upload it. And then I'll give you a grade and some feedback, so when you go to post the final your final journal, then you will hopefully get the maximum points possible, just because you know what to expect. In addition, there's 2 other videos I want you to watch this week. One is the Creations theme. It's the film adaptation from 1931. And as you watch it, just kind of compare it to what you read in the book, and just kind of think about how Hollywood kind of maybe portrays it versus what Mary wanted to portray it as. And then there's a lecture by Rabkin. This will be on your quiz, so I do recommend watching it. It's really interesting, and he has a lot of really cool stuff to say about this story. And this was written during the Romantic era, and we'll talk about that here a little bit more. But there is also this is a song by Franz Liszt, and it's romantic music. So I hope you guys kind of get a chance to listen to it. It's one of my favorites. It's really good. And then, like I said, you'll have your discussion board. And remember, just a lot of your grade comes from these discussion boards. So make sure you're staying on top of it. The way I grade my discussion boards, I'll grade them very similar to Dr. Brady's, but you should expect them to be, your initial post should be about 300 words. And then make sure you make specific references to the text. So back up your arguments based on passages from the text. So you can say, I believe that this story really talks about alienation, and I think this is plain and simple, as you can see when, and then you can cite the page and cite any saying that maybe the monster says or Victor says. So just make sure that you're always backing up your arguments with examples from the text to make it's going to create a much stronger argument. So that's what I mean by making specific references to the text. And to get those full points, you're going to need to do so. So let's move on to my PowerPoint here. Alright, so yeah, we're reading Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And she was born in 1797 on August 30th. Unfortunately, she didn't get to meet her mother after her mother had died while giving birth to her. So she was raised by her dad, William Godwin, and both of her parents were actually esteemed writers. They're very progressive for their days, both big into women's rights, and William Godwin does write a lot about justice in general. If you read his story, Caleb Williams, you can kind of see his view of the justice system and how it could be a little bit flawed. So again, both of she has writers in the family, runs in the blood, and but unfortunately, after her mom died, her father did remarry, or actually they weren't even married. Her and her mother, her father and her mother weren't married. They actually lived in separate homes, just because just due to their beliefs at the time, they didn't want to. Like I said, they were very progressive. But he did remarry, or marry after her mother died, and she did not get along too well with her stepmother. But she did start writing at a young age, and then at 17 she eloped with Percy Shelley, who was married at the time with kids. So it was kind of scandalous. And I will say that much of her life in early years is kind of scandalous and can rival most soap operas. After Mary eloped with Percy, her father wasn't too excited about it. Obviously didn't have his blessing on the whole situation. And after they left England, they were being pursued by creditors because Percy had a lot of debts out there that he was not paying up on. And they had a baby. Unfortunately, it died due to premature birth. So it's you can kind of get a sense of Mary's life, and as you read the story, some of this stuff does kind of show up, as death is a big part of her early life, and I imagine really had a huge impact on her. So she lost her first child, but later on they met up with Lord Byron at his villa on the shore of Lake Geneva, and they met Lord Byron because of one of Mary's sisters had met him, and I guess they were dating. We'll say Lord Byron kind of had many girlfriends and kind of got around. But at the time, I guess Mary's sister was the flavor of the month, or whatever you would want to call it. But on one stormy night, Lord Byron, Jane, who was Mary's sister, John Polidori, who's one of their doctors, Mary and Percy, we're just hanging around a campfire or just hanging out, and they're all reading each other ghost stories. And as they were reading these stories, they decided that they were going to challenge each other to make their own and see who can kind of create a contest out of it. Lord Byron, as you guys probably know, he's an esteemed writer. He wrote a lot of poetry in his time, and same with Percy. And John Polidori actually wrote one of the earliest English vampire stories. It's called The Vampire. It's really short. If you guys get a chance to read it, I recommend it. It's kind of interesting to kind of see maybe the origins of this story. But back to Mary's life. After a while, Percy's wife did commit suicide, and then once she did commit suicide, then that's when he married Mary. They had another child, Clara, who died in 1818, right when this book came out. And not long after, their son, William, died after the story came out. And unfortunately, so this is, just as you can kind of tell, it'd be really tough to be Mary at this moment in her life. And throughout all this, her marriage depression even got even worse because Percy was rather promiscuous. And so she was in a really dark time in her life. So after she completed writing the story, she started writing Matilda, which really kind of depicts Mary's mood at the time. But weeks later, Mary was pregnant again, and she ended up almost having a fatal miscarriage. But Percy ended up saving her, getting to the doctor. Unfortunately, pretty much days after he'd saved his wife's life, he died in a boating accident. He drowned. But they were able to recover his body. Unfortunately, due to he had a rare disease where his heart calcified. So when they burned his body, it didn't burn; it just stayed there. So at the time, a lot of people didn't really understand what's going on. So there's just a lot of fun stories about this situation. But they did recover the heart and gave it to Mary, who and they buried it with her at her funeral. So this story, you can kind of take it from three different perspectives. One of them is the romantic, reading it from a romantic perspective. And when I say by romantic, I'm not saying anything about maybe what you think, but it's an era, a romantic era. It's a type of art, and it's kind of against the Age of Enlightenment. And you can kind of see over here, this is what is considered romantic art. And the Romantics were big on nature, and not so much on people. And you'll see a lot of romantic art that the people are really small. And this was actually kind of an exception. This guy is actually pretty big for most of this artwork for this time. But there's a big focus on nature and its power. So you see like there's artworks of ships getting destroyed by the sea, or just or you're going to see like little bitty people and giant scenes of nature. So as I said, this is a painter by Caspar Friedrich. It's called Wonder Above the Sea of Fog. Came out at the same time that Mary wrote the first version of her story. And according to Caspar, a lot of what he viewed as art was the artist's feelings is law. So it was less about head knowledge and more just kind of about the emotion. And there was a big focus on originality, whereas in the past, a lot of the art was just kind of remake, or it came from books that were already written. It was Bible art. So this era kind of people just started doing their own thing. It wasn't really predictable. It was different for its time. And as you'll see, again, I talked about how nature is a big proponent in this time. And people just had this thought of how nature can just really cure and restore our health. And you'll see by reading this story, when Victor kind of gets away from everything and just goes into nature, you kind of feel that. You get that serenity that it brings. But then it also kind of talks about some of its awesome power. You'll read about this lightning that strikes this tree, or even through the eyes of the creature or through his story, you get to experience the romantic view of nature. They didn't trust humans, and it was kind of a push to get outside of the civilized world and just and get away from them. And another theme that you'll see with the romantic through the romantic era is just this travel to exotic lands. So in this book, the talk of the North Pole, or even like Victor, he travels throughout Europe, or there is talk of there's a family from Turkey in this story as well, that you'll read about. And again, it's counter to the Age of Enlightenment, which was right before the Romantic era, and this is the idea that reason is superior. But unfortunately, I think we are just as irrational as we are. We're just as irrational as we are rational, and you kind of probably saw that in the book with our main character who's struggling to be rational. He has this mathematical mind, but yet he has these other parts of him he can't really control, and they're irrational. Or he talks about these different math equations that aren't these simple numbers. You have the square root of -1, which is an imaginary number, or you have some of these irrational numbers that these decimals that just keep going on and on and on forever. And he struggles with that because it's not simple and it's not clean. I think that's just a lot of what humanity is. We aren't perfect, and we don't have the answers to everything, and we don't always operate in a calculated way. So it's kind of interesting to kind of read from that perspective, and it was a new thought for its time. So this story was written in 1818. She went through a lot, as you guys saw. All of her kids had died, and she rewrote the story and added some things in. And the newest version, which you guys will be reading, came out in 1831, which has all these revisions. And one of the big revisions that you'll see in here is this importance on parenting that you'll see. Victor will talk about how much his parents have done for him and how good he's had it. and then it contrasts with when you hear the creature and how Victor was actually a really poor father. So I said that, there's 3 different ways to read the story. There's romantic. There's also, you can read it. This is probably one of the earliest science fiction stories that exists. And then it's also a gothic horror novel. In this story, you'll hear, you'll read about some of the dark sides of humanity, or self-destructive side. Again, the Romantics did kind of push back against humanity, and didn't really have much of a trust or much hope in it. And there's multiple narrative voices. So the book starts out with in a letter format, as kind of an epistolary novel, with Walton communicating with his sister, who has the same initials as Mary does, MWS, so Margaret Walton Saville. But like I said, the story's kind of like an onion. It starts with Robert Walton, who's writing letters to his sister about this person he picks up on his boat. And then it kind of goes in, you hear Victor's story, and then it moves on to the monster, and then it goes back out to Victor, and then it goes back out to Walton. So it's an interesting kind of way that she structures this story. And actually, there's even a story within, there's another story at the very center of it, and it's actually one of my favorite parts of the story. I hope you guys enjoy it. But I don't want to give away any spoilers. And then you also kind of see like this idea of pushing the boundaries of science, and the consequences that pertains to that. So, a lot of, at the time, people were talking about alchemy and all of its powers, or even then, people were kind of a little bit afraid of science, and there's a little bit of hesitancy. Even today, this is seen so often with a lot of these science fiction movies that are coming out, or even stories. So one thing I wanted to include in here is there's so many different covers for this book. I thought it'd be interesting to kind of look at them all and kind of see them. So you kind of see like the focus on the monster in some of these, and how he is depicted. And as you'll read it, I'm curious to think if society's done a good job of portraying him or not. As opposed to maybe what Mary was trying to do. And you'll see, kind of Victor really depressed in the woods, or his wife, and then, this idea of him returning to the mountains, the science fiction kind of cover. But there's so many different covers out there, and I just thought it'd be kind of fun to show those. Not sure what your cover looks like, but if you're willing to share that in the story, and just let me know how it may have impacted the way you read the story, that'd be kind of fun to talk about as well. So this novel is pretty much timeless. A couple different themes. It's education and knowledge, and the pursuit of knowledge, and then how important that is, and how hard should we pursue it, and to what cost? At what cost did that come? So you'll read about that. Also, alienation is a big part of this story, and the loss of friendship or love. I think we can all relate to that in some way or another. Rejection and abandonment is another theme that shows up in here. I think one of the harshest things that people experience in their lives is rejection, and it does come with a lot of scars. And then there is also this idea of responsibility for our creation. And if you don't speak Spanish, this is a print by Francisco Goya, another romantic artist. And it says, it's kind of hard to read here, but it does say, El sueño de la razón produce monstruos. And what that means is just the sleep of reason produces monsters. So this idea of what we create, and when we kind of put away reason to the back burner, what consequences do come with that. So it's kind of a interesting print that I felt was kind of relevant to this story. So this is the end. I just kind of want to leave you with this, and this is what Mary will leave you with if you read her introduction after her. This is after her revision. And I think in this little segment here, it really kind of captures just the stuff that she had to go through, and gives you a nice little introduction to the story. So, and now, once again, I bid my hideous progeny go forth and prosper. I have an affection for it was the offspring of happy days, when death and grief were but words, which found no true echo in my heart. Its several pages speak of many a walk, many a drive, and many a conversation, when I was not alone, and my companion was one who is in this world. I should never see more. But this is for myself. My readers have nothing to do with these associations. So I hope you enjoy this story, and I look forward to seeing your guys' comments on the discussion board. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me or call me. Have a great week. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.